Lots of developers that are new to iOS development tell me stories of their struggles with auto layout, some even giving in and deciding it'll be easier just to support one orientation. Time to show you how I do auto layout in my RubyMotion apps, with the help of Motion Layout and Auto Layout's visual format language. The first app we'll take a look at is the Timer app from the RubyMotion Samples repo on GitHub. I'll clone the RubyMotion Samples repo and head into the RubyMotion Samples/ios/timer directory. I'll run bundle init to create a gem file. I still need to add my rake gem or I'll get an error. I'll open up Sublime and click on the gem file in my sidebar. At the bottom of my gem file, I'll add the rake gem. I'll now run bundle to make sure all my gems are installed. Now I can run rake to compile my code and then launch the app in my simulator. As you can see, when I rotate my simulator, the views don't reflow in the way I'd like them to. So I'll go back into Sublime, and still in my gem file, I'll add the motion layout gem. I'll then open the rake file and require motion layout. Run bundle again to make sure everything is installed. I go back to Sublime, open up the app directory, then the timer.rb file, which is my only view controller for this application. The code here creates a label and button that handles stopping and starting the timer. I'm going to remove the lines that set the frames and add the label and button to the controller's view. I can delete the line that sets the margin too. I'll create a motion layout block, then set the view for my layout to be my controller's view. Then I set the subviews for this layout to be the state, which is the label, and the action, which is the button. Motion Layout will automatically add these subviews to the view I set to be the main view for the layout, so I don't have to. Okay, I'll stop here for a moment to explain Auto Layout's visual format language before I continue. The visual format language is a way to describe your layout in a string. Then Auto Layout will turn this into all the constraints that resize and reflow the layout. The most basic part of a visual format string is the pipe symbol, which refers to our super view for the subviews. Just treat it like the edge of the parent view. The next symbol is the dash, which is purely a syntax element for our visual format strings. You use it to separate each part of the string. To specify where a view sits in the layout, you can put the names you pass to your layout for the subviews in square brackets like this. If you wanted to say there is exactly 20 points of space between the superview and the action button, you can write it like this. That will tell Auto Layout there should be exactly 20 points of space on either side of the button, and the button will grow and shrink to fit the screen, but always keep the 20 points of margin. Then to say there should be at least 20 points of space, you surround the spacing in brackets, and just use the greater than and equal symbol. Now that won't work because Auto Layout won't know what to grow and shrink, the button or the spacing. So you can specify a size for the button too, like this. Now Auto Layout knows to always keep the button 200 points wide. In all of these, you can use equals equals, greater than and equals, and less than and equals. You can replace these numbers with what are called metrics, and I'll show you how those work now, back in the view controller as I continue to create my layout. Also, if you'd like to read about Auto Layout's visual format language, you can view the documentation on Apple's developer website, which I'll link to in the show notes. I add the metrics, just like I do the subviews. I'll have a margin of 20 points and a height of 40 for both the label and the button. With Auto Layout, you have to specify both the vertical layout and the horizontal layout. First, I'll create the vertical layout. I start with the edges of the superview. Then I know I want both the state and action in there, so I can add those. I need the margin between the two views, so I put that in between the state and the action. Now what I'm trying to do is get the view vertically centered in the screen, so I can just say there should be at least 20 points of margin on both the top and bottom, but it will expand if it can. The horizontal layout is a bit simpler, but I'll need to call it twice. Once for the state, once for the action. Starting with the state, I put in the left superview edge, then the margin next to the edge. I'll then put in my state view, and the margin again, and the other superview edge. I can just copy and paste this for the action, and change the name of the view. Alright, that's my layout ready to go. Let's run Rake and open it up in the simulator. Looks like my layout is just sitting at the bottom of the screen. I'll head back to Sublime and see what's wrong. So auto layout is giving the top margin a higher preference to expand than the bottom margin. That's okay, I've got a fix for this. I'll create two new metrics, one called Portrait Top Margin, which will be equal to half of the view's height, minus the 100 points my views take up. And then a similar one, called Landscape Bottom Margin, which will be equal to half the width of the screen, which is the height in landscape mode, minus the 100 points for my views. I remove the top and bottom margins in my vertical layout. Then the top margin will now be less than or equal to the portrait top margin, and the bottom margin will be equal to or greater than the landscape bottom margin. This will give both equal preference, and so in portrait mode, the top margin will be allowed to be its full height, because the bottom margin is expanding, and in landscape mode, the top margin can shrink, and the bottom margin can shrink to its minimum. I'll run Rake again to compile the new code and open the simulator. Now I can see it sitting nicely in the middle, and when I rotate the simulator, it stays centered. This is a fairly simple application. Let's have a look at something a bit more complicated. I have an application I'm working on called One Tweet World, and I'm ready to start putting the views I've set up on the screen. It's very simple at the moment. I've set up a basic app delegate and view controller for me to configure to use motion layout. Opening up the gem file from the sidebar, I'll add motion layout to the bottom. In terminal, I'll run bundle to ensure all my dependencies are installed. I'll expand the app directory in Sublime, then the controllers directory, and click on the tweets view controller to open that up. I start off the same way by creating a motion layout block and setting the layouts view to be my controller's view. Next, I add the subviews: user image, user tweet, toolbar, username, and then user bio. I won't add any metrics this time, because there is too many different metrics, and it will be cleaner and more expressive to just write the numbers in the strings. I'll start with the vertical layout. I'll need to create 3 parts to the vertical layout. One for the user image, one for the username and bio, and the last one for the user's tweet and the toolbar, which houses my next button. For the user image layout, I add the pipe characters for the superview. Then I want the user image to always be 40 points from the top of the screen. I'll add in the user image view now, and set its height to be 70 using the brackets equals syntax. Now I just tell it I want at least 20 points of margin between the bottom of the screen and the user image, which will make the bottom margin just reach up to the image because the image's height and the top margin are fixed. The vertical layout for the username and bio is similar, again starting with the super view and the 40-point top margin, followed by the username view with a height of 20 points. I will put 10 points of space between the bottom of the username view in the top of the user bio view, and add my user bio in, setting its height to 40 points. I finish off this vertical layout with the same 20-point stretching bottom margin. These two layouts will fix the user's image, name, and bio 40 points from the top of the screen. The last vertical layout is super simple. I first add the pipe characters, then the top margin will be a fixed 120, which will give 10 points of spacing between the user details and the tweet. Next, I add the tweet with no height specified, so it can grow and shrink. 10 points of margin, and the toolbar view, which will be flush with the super view. That's all for the vertical layouts. Now I need to create 5 horizontal layouts, one for each view. I'll start with the horizontal layout for the user image, which will have 20 points of margin on the left, then the user image view, which will be 70 points wide, and I'll have a minimum of 20 points on the right-hand side, which will grow and shrink depending on the orientation. Next is the username, which has 100 points of margin on the right to give it 10 points between the user image and the username, which I won't set a width for so the username label grows and shrinks. And finally, it will also sit 20 points from the right. The user bio layout will be the same as the username layout, so I'll copy and paste it. I'll also copy and paste again for the user's tweet, but I'll change the left margin to be 20 points. Finally, the toolbar will be flush with the sides of the super view. When I do this, I can leave out the dashes. Alright, I'll run this and see what I've created. I'll run the rake command in the terminal. Now I can't see much on the screen, so I'll hold command and click on the main view, which will select it in my REPL. Switching back to the REPL, I'll make all of the subviews backgrounds red by selecting them all, then iterating over them and making their background colors red. The REPL is by far one of my favorite things about RubyMotion. It lets you do things like this very quickly to test ideas. I can now see in my simulator all of my views, but if I rotate the simulator, I can see that the user image stays where it is, and the username and user bio stretch to the width of the screen, but stay 10 points from the user image. I can also see that the user's tweet shrunk its height and expanded its width to fill the space. You can now see how powerful motion layout and the auto layout visual format language can be to quickly create layouts that can handle both orientations. These are some quick tips to make it easier on you though. Follow these guidelines and you'll usually find that you don't have to deal with crazy constraint conflicts and some buggy results. Only use a view once in your vertical layouts if you can, and once in your horizontal layouts. Use strings for the keys for your subviews and metric hashes. If you're trying to center vertically, use the hack I showed you. Or if you come up against a similar issue trying to create a different type of layout, try creating a similar kind of hack. That's it for this episode. There is links in the show notes for the source code and to some documentation for some of the classes I used and motion layout. If you're interested in seeing more screencasts on RubyMotion, head on over to upcoming.motioninmotion.tv. MotionInMotion will be going live soon, and you'll be able to subscribe to my regularly released screencasts about RubyMotion. If you sign up in the first week after launch, you'll get a 20% discount on the lifetime of your subscription. So don't miss out. Sign up for the launch list now. For updates, follow FluffyJack on Twitter.